October 30th, 2003. Beijing. Europe signs a historic agreement. It invites China to build part of the Galileo satellite system. We are naive. We think it's a scientific partnership. We entrust Beijing with the SAR module, the one meant for humanitarian rescue operations. But a few years later, French intelligence dismantles one of those modules and makes a chilling discovery. Inside the power system, hidden among the circuits, there are undeclared components. Former director René Oosterlinck will confirm the truth. They are modified capacitors, a physical kill switch. With a simple command from the ground, China could have made them blow up, destroying European satellites in orbit during a war. Europe wakes up just in time. The Chinese modules are removed and returned to sender. But the damage is done. China keeps the money, keeps the know-how stolen from our laboratories, and uses it to build BeiDou, its rival system. That time, in space, we escaped by a hair's breadth. But while we were protecting the sky, we forgot to look beneath our feet. Over the past 20 years, quietly and with our authorization, Beijing has bought the pillars of our civilization. In this video, we will show you the physical map of this conquest. We'll see who controls the ports where our goods arrive, the energy that lights our homes, even the medicines in your cabinets. We'll show you how much of our sovereignty is left and who holds the remote control of our daily lives. Welcome to Amazing Europe. Everything starts at sea. 90% of the goods you use every day enter Europe by ship. Whoever controls the ports controls the continent's breathing. And today, the heart of the Mediterranean beats in Beijing, or at least a few ventricles do. Look at the port of Piraeus in Athens. Until 20 years ago, it was a peripheral port. Today, it's competing with Valencia for the title of the Mediterranean's #1 port, and it sits firmly in Europe's top 5. But there's a detail. It's no longer Greek. The Port Authority is 67% controlled by COSCO Shipping, the Chinese state giant. This isn't a simple shareholding. It's an enclave. How did we get here? It wasn't a hostile invasion. It was a fire sale. During the 2010 debt crisis, Europe's troika backed Athens into a corner. Sell everything to repay your debts. Europe forced the sale, and China was the only one to show up with cash. We pushed our most precious maritime asset into the arms of our systemic rival. Why Piraeus specifically? It's known as the Dragon Head in China's Belt and Road strategy. China doesn't buy ports at random. It buys integrated logistics. Goods come ashore in Athens and are loaded onto the China-financed Land-Sea Express railway, which crosses Serbia and reaches the heart of Central Europe in 4 days. A commercial highway that bypasses Northern Europe's ports. But the strategy doesn't stop there. It's a pincer. In the west, COSCO controls 51% of the Valencia container terminal, dominating the Atlantic gateway for all goods entering the Mediterranean through the Strait of Gibraltar. In the north, in 2023, they entered the port of Hamburg. There they took 24.9% of the Tollerort terminal, a political foot in the door, obtained despite opposition from German intelligence services. Chancellor Scholz gave in to the pressure. Either you let us in, or we move our ships to competing ports and you'll lose billions and thousands of jobs. The consequence? A loss of political sovereignty. When the EU tried to condemn human rights violations in China at the UN, Greece used its veto to block everything. You don't bite the hand that feeds you. Today, if a global crisis were to erupt, who would get docking priority in our ports? European companies or the owners' companies? The answer is in the flag flying over the pier. Let's move from the sea to the mainland. Here we find the greatest contradiction of our age. Europe has decided to save the planet. By 2035, the goal is to cut emissions from new cars by 90%. Most of them will be electric. But there's a problem politicians don't like to say out loud. Green cars need dirty metals. Building an electric car takes almost 4 times as much copper as a conventional one. And this is where our hypocrisy begins. We want the batteries, but we don't want the mines in our backyard. It's the NIMBY syndrome. Not in my backyard. China looked at that hypocrisy and said, "No problem, we'll dig for you. Welcome to Bor, Serbia." We're outside the European Union, but in the geographic heart of the continent. Here, the Chinese state giant Zijin Mining bought up the land and carved it open to create one of Europe's largest copper mining complexes. They invested over $3 billion. While we were shutting down mines to protect the landscape, they were opening gigantic ones on our doorstep. The cost? Ask the residents of Krivelj, who have been breathing orange dust for years and watching sulfur dioxide levels exceed the legal limit by 5 times. But the rest of Europe is fine with that. The pollution stays in Serbia. The copper comes to us. Or rather, it goes to Hungary. Just follow the trucks crossing the border toward Debrecen. This is where the Cathedral of 2026 rises, Kattle's Gigafactory. It's a €7 billion industrial monster, the largest battery plant on the continent. And who are the customers outside the gates? BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagen. The German giants built their plants right next door to install Chinese batteries in German cars. And here is the deep truth of this green paradox. We've gone from dependence on Russian gas to dependence on Chinese technology. The German car you'll buy this year is a masterpiece of engineering, but it's an empty shell. The car's heart, the battery, which accounts for 40% of the total price, is Chinese. And it's a double trap. The copper comes from Serbia, extracted by Chinese firms. But what about lithium, cobalt and graphite? Those arrive by ship directly from China or from their mines in Africa. Whether it's dug up on our doorstep or imported from Beijing, the result doesn't change. What happens if tomorrow a diplomatic crisis erupts and Beijing decides to slow down supplies? Bavaria's assembly lines will be in serious trouble. First we say China is one of our greatest rivals, and then we hand it the engine of our industry, and we called it progress. After getting its hands on the ports, Beijing made the decisive leap. This time the target isn't visible, but something far deeper: energy. And here, the strategy becomes more sophisticated. There's no need to buy every power plant, every cable, every pipeline. It's enough to sit in the control room. And a major part of this capitulation has a name and a date: Italy, July 2014. The country is sinking in debt. Cash is needed immediately. So the government does what everyone does with their back against the wall: it sells. 35% of CDP Reti ends up in the hands of the State Grid Corporation of China for just over €2 billion. On paper, it's an investment. In reality, it's the transfer of a share of national security. CDP Reti is not just any company, it's the holding company that controls Turner, which runs the national electricity grid, and Snam, the highway that carries the natural gas that heats homes and powers factories. If Turner stops, Italy goes dark. If Snam is blocked, industries shut down and homes go cold. But what did China get with that 35%? It's not sitting in the audience, but it is sitting at the table. Qin Jingshen, a state grid representative, sits on the boards. He has a voice, he has a vote, he has access to expansion plans and to decisions on where to invest the billions of the energy transition. And above all, he has access to the big picture, a map of the vulnerabilities of a NATO country's power grid. Beijing now knows exactly where the grid is weak and where it could be pushed into crisis. If you think this sounds like a spy movie theory, ask the cybersecurity experts. Recent reports have raised a disturbing alarm. Inside many Chinese-made solar inverters installed across European infrastructure, there are vulnerabilities that could be exploited remotely. It's the kill switch risk, paralysing segments of the power grid with a command sent from thousands of kilometres away. Portugal knows this well. Since 2012, its main electricity company, EDP, has had China Three Gorges as its largest shareholder. Lisbon has become a laboratory where Beijing studies how our networks work and then replicates them and competes against us. But the real point of no return is political. Chinese presence in these Italian companies is isolating Italy. When Italian firms tried to expand into Northern Europe to create continental giants, they hit a wall of distrust. The message from Berlin and Brussels is increasingly clear. We can't integrate our strategic networks with someone who has China on their board. Italy risks being branded as contaminated. And if Italy wanted to buy back that stake to become master in its own house again, State Grid would now ask at least 5 billion. Italy sold a piece of its own light switch, and now it is discovering that the hand on the dial answers not only to Rome, but to a global strategy decided 8,000 kilometers away. Forget for a moment the ports and the power grids. Let's move into an even more intimate territory, the medicine cabinet in our homes. To grasp the depth of what has happened, we have to look at a figure governments ignored for 30 years. In 1990, Europe produced more than half of the pharmaceutical active ingredients it consumed. Today, in 2026, that share has collapsed to 25%. We have literally dismantled our basic chemical industry for one reason only: to save money. But what exactly is an active ingredient? Picture an ordinary paracetamol tablet. 99% is made up of excipients, inert substances that give the pill its volume and shape. Only 1% is the molecule that actually treats you, and that 1% is now produced in China in more than 90% of cases. From antibiotics like amoxicillin to heart medications, all the way to insulin for diabetics, Europe is now a patient on a ventilator whose switch sits in Beijing. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's plain economic reality. Producing a kilo of paracetamol in Switzerland costs about €2. In China, it costs 30 cents. No European company can compete, thanks to rock-bottom labour costs and environmental standards that would be illegal in Europe. The result? European plants have shut their doors, one after another. But what are the real risks? Is this a serious problem or a false fear? It's still too early to say, but we can already see what has happened. In January 2024, as many as 19 European countries faced a critical shortage of antibiotics. Pharmacies had empty shelves, doctors didn't know what to prescribe, and thousands of parents were desperately searching for medicines for their children. It wasn't random. China, going through a domestic energy crisis, prioritized its own internal demand, slowing exports to the West. The real risk in 2026 isn't mass poisoning. It's obvious China won't use its monopoly on active ingredients to poison us. But several analysts have pointed out that it can be used as a tool of political pressure. China would only need to order a technical stoppage at factories concentrated in 4 provinces to put the entire European healthcare system under serious strain within 3 weeks. And this isn't a remote possibility, the European Union itself has noticed. The EU has responded by launching a critical medicines alliance and reforming its laws to bring production back home. But building these plants takes years and billions. In the meantime, our health remains a strategic asset managed in large part by a foreign power. We traded our security for cheap drugs, and now we are discovering that the real price isn't paid in money but in autonomy. In recent years, European politics has waged a loud battle against TikTok and Huawei's 5G antennas. We were told our data was in danger, but while governments argued over smartphone apps, in the silence of our airports and on the seabed beneath our waters, the exact opposite was happening. Europe was installing the real Chinese Big Brother right at its borders. Welcome to the world of NUCTEC. You may never have heard the name, but it's the company that made the security scanners you pass through in Bologna, Venice, Zagreb, or, until recently, Warsaw. NUCTEC is not a private company. It is controlled by China National Nuclear Corporation, a state entity that answers to Beijing. And NUCTEC doesn't stop at metal detectors. Its machines scan entire containers in ports and fully loaded trucks at customs. That means a Chinese state company holds the data on a large share of what enters and leaves Europe. It knows which components our industries buy, which weapons our armies move, and which goods fill our warehouses. It's a complete X-ray of our entire economy. So how did NUCTEC expand this far? With the oldest trick in the book, price. NUCTEC wins tenders because it costs 30 to 40% less than Western competitors. To save on budgets, we handed our security checks to someone who, by law, cannot guarantee our privacy. Of course, the risk isn't that someone in the Chinese government is looking inside our suitcase. The risk is biometric. Modern scanners capture our faces, read passport data, and profile passengers. This is where legal reality comes in. In China, the 2017 National Intelligence Law obliges any Chinese company to cooperate with the state's intelligence work. Full stop. There is no such thing as corporate secrecy that can withstand that. If Beijing asks NUCTEC for the transit data of a European airport, the company must provide it. And if we lift our eyes to the sea, the pattern repeats. In Marseille, the Peace Cable comes ashore, a 15,000-kilometre digital highway linking Europe to Asia. Unlike other cables, this one is operated by the Chinese group Hengtong. It's the first time Beijing has physical control of the artery that carries emails, banking transactions, and sensitive data between the two continents. What's the real consequence? Not, obviously, that a Chinese agent is spying on you in real time. The danger is strategic leverage. In the event of a diplomatic crisis, China owns the hardware that manages our borders and our communications. It could slow data traffic or profile the movements of people of interest. And this isn't alarmism, because the European Union itself acknowledged the problem by opening a formal investigation in December 2025. But the machines are still there. We sold our biometric data for a discount on the purchase price. We ban Huawei, yet we let the Chinese state scan our faces. After seeing these facts, two questions are inevitable. Is Europe finished? And above all, beyond China, is there anyone else trying to buy it? Before we find out if you found this video informative, we kindly ask you to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell. It costs you nothing, but for us, it's an incredibly important gesture. Thank you, truly. So, is Europe finished? For the first time in 20 years, the answer is no. Between 2024 and 2026, something happened that history books will remember. Europe stopped being naive. The crucial date is the 11th of December 2025. That day, Brussels signed the agreement to reform the screening of foreign investment. Until yesterday, if China wanted to buy a port and France said no, Beijing would go to Greece or Hungary, buy it there, and still get access to the single market. From today, it doesn't work like that anymore. Under the new rules, if an investment threatens common security, Europe can block it centrally. China can no longer go shopping for the weakest link in the chain. Even Germany, which for years looked the other way in the name of exports, has switched sides. Berlin's move to block the acquisition of Snam and its support for 38% tariffs on Chinese electric cars show that Germany has finally understood. There is no business without security. But we have to be honest. This awakening comes at a price, and it will be steep. We can't tear up contracts signed 10 years ago. Piraeus will remain Chinese until the concession expires. Our dependence on Chinese medicines will take years and billions to dismantle. We are blocking new Piraeuses, not erasing the old ones. And above all, sovereignty costs. It costs us time, the time we spend getting informed, as we are doing right now. Because the first step toward freedom is being aware of what's happening around us and not being passive spectators. But it also costs money. For years, our God was savings. We enjoyed low prices because we outsourced production to China. Taking back the keys to our house means accepting that solar panels, medicines, and technology will cost more. It means inflation and possible trade retaliation. The party of easy credit is over. Europe has decided to take back control of its own destiny, but now we must be willing to pay the bill. However, while we were obsessed with China's strategy, someone else was shopping in Europe undisturbed. Someone who isn't chasing control of factories, but wants control of prestige and of consciences. Look at the gleaming skyscrapers of Porta Nuova in Milan. Look at Heathrow Airport in London. Look at some of the richest football clubs in the world, like Paris Saint-Germain. Who really owns them, in full or in part? It's not China. It's the Gulf sovereign wealth funds, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates. If China has taken Europe's muscles, they want to buy its face and in part its soul. If you want us to open the file on the Gulf Masters, write Gulf below in the comments and we'll make a video for you. If this topic interests you, we recommend you watch this video where we analysed some of Turkey's geopolitical moves that affect us and the responses and non-responses from our leaders. That's all for this video. See you next time.